Some argue that axioms cannot really be proven, but that's not necessarily the case. Axiom means that you take something to be true, but that doesn't necessarily imply that they're not able to be proven or that you are not able to obtain some kind of serious epistemic justification for them. So in logic, for example, there are a bunch of principles, standard logic, let's say, because there are a few logics which are a bit different. One of them would be the rule of non-contradiction, right? And then some people would say, well, that's it. It's just a rule. They just accept it, and you cannot really have any proof of it or whatever whatsoever. But that's not necessarily true. Of course, there is something called meta-logic and stuff like that. But philosophy could offer some kind of justification for holding that view, or some argument, the deductive argument that implies that this principle, so the principle of non-contradiction, and that will be the view that contradictions are false, that this is a true proposition, right? So, and there are a few ways to do that. One of them is with sort of principle, I think it's called explosion or whatever. And that is to say that, okay, assume that there is a true contradiction, right? So that would imply that A and not A is true. So both A is true and not A is true. Okay. Well, what really follows from that? Well, if A is true, then A or B, and I'm talking about the inclusive or, so with inclusive or A or B is true either if A is true or B is true or both are true. Under the exclusive or, A or B would be true only if A is true or only if B is true. So one of them would be true, the other would be false, right? Out of A and B. And of course, with B, I mean something that's not identical to A. Not just in terms of truth values, but just something that's not A, okay? And it is a proposition, okay. So, but guess what follows from that, right? If you have A or B being true, and you have A being false, which you do have, because from the true contradiction, it follows that not A is true, right? So both A is true and not A is true, right? Then you basically have B being true, right? And B could be any kind of proposition. In fact, you can do the same for not B. So then you get B being true and not B being true. But this could be any kind of proposition, right? And then, so it could even be the proposition that all non-propositions are true. So, and it could also be the proposition all non-propositions could be false. So now what do you end up with? Basically, any proposition is both true and false, and every non-proposition is both true and false. So you end up with extreme kind of counterintuitive sort of statements. So you end up with statements that, for example, octopuses are mushrooms, or because that's just a true statement, right? That could be B, for example. Yeah. You could end up with there are triangles with 5 sides, whatever, right? But then guess what? If you have a statement in the form A implies B and B is false, well, that implies that A is false. So if the principle of non-contradiction implies that helicopters are mushrooms, well, but helicopters are not mushrooms, then the principle of non-contradiction is actually false. So you can easily produce a deductive argument through philosophy. You can, this is philosophy of logic, right? You can also do meta-logic, whatever, and epistemically you can obtain pretty easily a justification for that view. So you do see that axioms are not just something that's just taken to be true, it's something that you could actually have a justification for.